The evening was meant to be uneventful. One of those typical nights that blend into each other, marked by predictable conversations and the soft hum of background music. Familiar faces filled the space, including hers, Odessa, my wife. I watched her from across the room, noticing every graceful movement, every effortless laugh at words I couldn't quite catch, and the way her fingers traced the rim of her wine glass. She seemed carefree, glowing even as if nothing troubled her. But for weeks, an unease had been building inside me, a quiet alarm I kept silencing with reason. I told myself I was reading too much into things, that I was being paranoid. That fragile sense of normalcy shattered in one fleeting glance. Her eyes met mine from across the room, and in that instant, something shifted. Her smile weakened, her posture stiffened, like a startled animal sensing danger. That look told me everything. She realized I had noticed. And in that moment, so did I. I hadn't planned to search through her phone or eavesdrop on hushed words. I didn't need any of that. The truth was right there in front of me. There are certain moments when reality crashes into you with such force that everything becomes instantly clear. This was one of them. She excused herself with such ease that no one noticed. A small laugh, a brief touch on someone's shoulder, and then she was weaving through the crowd, vanishing like smoke. I saw her grab her purse and make her way to the door. She assumed I wouldn't follow. That I would stay, sip my drink, smile, and pretend everything was fine. But she was mistaken. I placed my glass on the table, my hands steady despite the turmoil inside, and headed toward the exit. The evening wasn't ending, it was only getting started. Outside, the air was sharper than I expected, or maybe it just felt that way given the weight of what was unraveling. I stepped out, my heartbeat calm, though my thoughts ran wild. Odessa was already moving toward her car, not quite rushing, but clearly not relaxed. She believed she was being subtle. She thought time was on her side. For a brief second, I nearly let her go. I considered turning back, returning to the warmth of the party, and pretending I hadn't seen the guilt written all over her face. It would have been easier. It would have spared me from confronting a truth too painful to bear. But I wasn't the kind of man to look away. Drawing in a deep breath, I called her name. She paused, not dramatically, but just enough for me to catch it. The way her fingers tightened on her purse strap gave her away. Then she turned, her expression composed, offering a surprised smile. "Oh, hey, darling. I was just stepping out to get something from the car," she said, the lie delivered with flawless ease. It was the kind of response that could fool anyone but me. As I walked toward her, the sounds of laughter and music behind me began to fade. "You left rather suddenly," I said. She gave a light laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to gloss over tension. "I just needed some air. It was feeling a bit crowded in there." Stopping a few feet from her, I searched her face. This was the woman I had shared my life with. The woman I believed I understood completely. "And you didn't think to tell me?" A subtle flicker of irritation passed through her eyes before she tilted her head, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't realize I needed to ask for permission to step outside. Classic deflection. I should have confronted her then, demanded answers, pressed her on why she looked so cornered the moment our eyes met. Why she disappeared so fast. But something inside me still clung to hope, to the idea that there might be an explanation that could make this hollow feeling disappear. So I gave her that chance. "Odessa, is there something you want to say?" She blinked once, just enough to show she'd heard me. A brief pause followed, measured, calculated. I could almost hear her thoughts racing as she tried to gauge how much I knew, what she could deny. Then she stepped closer with a soft smile. "You're being strange tonight," she said gently, placing her hand on my chest, a familiar gesture meant to comfort. "Let's head back inside. People will start asking where we went." Yes, people would wonder. They'd notice her abrupt departure. They'd notice me following. And if I created a scene, if I let emotions boil over, the questions would come. She was counting on that silence. Counting on me to let it slide. I looked down at her hand resting on me, then back into her eyes. And in that moment I made a choice. I wasn't going to let this go. Not tonight. Not ever. I allowed her to lead me back through the doors, not because I believed her, not because I was ready to forget, but because I needed to see how far she was willing to carry the lie. I had to see the story she was crafting right as it unfolded. The warmth of the house, once comforting, now felt heavy, almost suffocating, compared to the fresh, cool night outside. All around us, people laughed and chatted like nothing had shifted, as though everything remained untouched. But something had changed, and I could feel it in my bones. Odessa had no trouble blending back into the party, stepping smoothly into conversations and flashing her perfected smile. But my attention had moved away from her expression. I was focused on her movements now. She glanced at her phone a little too quickly before tucking it back into her clutch. Her shoulders stiffened just slightly at the sight of someone across the room. And that someone was Isaac. A man I had welcomed into my home, into my life, without a second thought. I had once respected him deeply, counted him among my closest friends. But standing there, watching the unspoken exchange between him and my wife, something almost imperceptible to everyone else, I could finally see the truth with painful clarity. His eyes flicked in her direction just for an instant. She didn't look back at him directly, but I noticed the subtle parting of her lips, the way she shifted her stance. There was something between them, something real, built in secret, in moments stolen when no one was watching. The realization hit me hard, but I forced myself to keep it together. I moved through the party like everything was fine, even though something inside me had fractured. I wasn't merely hurt anymore. I was fully awake. A part of me wanted to expose it all right there, in front of everyone, to shatter the illusion with one bold move. But that wouldn't be enough. Not yet. So I played the part. I let Odessa believe she had covered her tracks, that she had smoothed over my doubts. She guided me through polite conversations, introducing me with the charm of a loving wife. I smiled, laughed when I was supposed to, even placed my hand on her waist when she leaned into me. All the while, my mind was spinning. I was already planning my next move. Odessa believed she was still in control. She thought I'd dismiss my suspicions, accept her performance, and let the night roll on uninterrupted. But I had reached my limit. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I used to think betrayal came with chaos, loud arguments, slammed doors, tearful confessions. I had been wrong. Some betrayals whisper. They creep in quietly, wrapping themselves around your daily life until, one day, you tug on a single thread and everything begins to unravel. That night, I tugged on that thread. I stayed close to her, studying every step, every glance, every move she made as she floated through the room, pretending all was well. But the more I watched, the more the truth revealed itself. Isaac never strayed too far, always positioned where she could see him. And Odessa would sneak quick looks his way only when she thought I wasn't watching. They never interacted directly, but the unspoken tension between them was impossible to ignore. What I saw wasn't a guess. It wasn't paranoia. It was undeniable evidence. I let her believe I was distracted, that I had pushed my doubts aside. I stayed in character, smiling, behaving like the devoted husband, but inside, my thoughts were razor-sharp. I needed confirmation. I had to hear the truth from her. So I slipped away from the party, quietly disappearing into the hallway that led to Jake's study. The music and laughter were loud enough to cover my exit. More importantly, nobody noticed when Odessa vanished too. But I knew she would come. I knew her too well. She was too careful not to. When she stepped into the room, her face was calm but calculated, like someone walking into a negotiation. She closed the door gently behind her and spoke with a soft voice laced in frustration. "Harlan, are we really doing this here?" Her tone suggested that I was being unreasonable, like I had blown something small out of proportion. But I didn't bite. Leaning against the desk, arms crossed, I asked, "Doing what, Odessa?" She paused briefly, then gave me a composed, understanding smile, the same one she used to disarm tension before it escalated. "You've been acting strange all evening. I just want to understand what's going on." It was a skilled attempt at shifting the blame, to turn my accusations into mere confusion. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I tilted my head, watching her the same way I had been watching her all night. "Tell me the truth," I said, keeping my tone even. Her reaction was almost imperceptible, a blink, a pause just slightly too long. "About what?" she asked. I let the silence stretch between us. Guilt despises silence. It needs noise and explanations to survive. Odessa laughed softly and shook her head. "Harlan, I don't know what you think you saw, but—" "I saw enough," I interrupted. Her face lost a shade of color just briefly, but I caught it. That was all I needed. She took a slow breath, regaining her composure, then replied with a calm that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't know what you're trying to suggest, but I think maybe you've had too much to drink. We should go home." She reached out for my arm, but I didn't budge. For the first time since we had gotten married, I truly saw her. Unmasked and unfiltered. She was the kind of woman who always stayed a step ahead. Someone who knew how to bend the truth before anyone else could speak up. She was skilled in controlling the story, ensuring it always favored her. But not this time. This time, I was ready, and I had no intention of letting her escape without facing reality. She was going to hear what I had to say, and I wanted her to understand clearly that this confrontation was far from over. I stood still, the weight of everything we had built now pressing against my chest like an anchor. Jake's study seemed to shrink around me, the air dense and oppressive. Odessa's expression was composed, too composed. Like every angle of her face had been practiced in front of a mirror countless times. She believed she could control this moment, guide the conversation like she had done so many times before. But she hadn't accounted for one thing. I had already put the pieces together. Taking a deliberate breath, I straightened up and stepped away from the desk. "So, do you really believe I'm that naive?" I asked. Her mouth opened slightly, but she quickly masked the reaction. "Harlan, you're blowing this out of proportion." "I don't think so," I replied, my tone steady and quiet. "I saw the way you looked at him. I noticed how you avoided speaking to him when I was around, as if I wouldn't catch on." She let out a sharp breath, as though I was draining her energy. "You're imagining things. It's not what you think." There it was again, that same old move, shifting the truth, making me second-guess what I had seen with my own eyes. I stepped in closer, cutting down the distance between us. "Then explain why you left the party the second you noticed I was watching." She faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. "You're twisting this," she said, arms folding defensively. "I just needed some fresh air. I didn't realize I needed your approval to step outside." I chuckled quietly, shaking my head. "Right? Just like you didn't expect me to notice how uneasy you looked out there." She was boxed in, and she knew it. I could see the calculation behind her gaze, the frantic search for a way out. She was trying to find the right combination of words that might make me question everything again. But I was finished doubting. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone. Her eyes darted to it, and for the first time that night, a flicker of genuine fear surfaced. She hadn't expected this. She had always been so meticulous, so careful. But this time she had miscalculated. "I want you to be honest with me, Odessa," I said, keeping my voice level even as my insides churned. Years of trust, of love, of shared memories. It all felt like it was collapsing in front of me. I was looking at someone I barely recognized now. Her breath caught for a split second. "Harlan, put that away." "And why would I do that?" I tilted my head slightly. "Worried about what I might show you?" She didn't say a word. That silence spoke louder than any denial could. I let the moment linger, heavy and unbearable, before I continued. "You had a chance, Odessa. You could have told me everything. You could have been honest from the start. But instead, you walked away from that party like you thought I'd just let it go." Her hands clenched at her sides, her poise beginning to unravel. The mask she wore was starting to fracture. I had her backed into a corner, and I wasn't planning to let up. Not now. Not ever. The atmosphere between us thickened with tension. Odessa remained still, her carefully maintained image beginning to fall apart, second by second. Outside the study, the faint sounds of laughter and music from the party drifted in, muted. But inside this room, there was only silence, and the slow unraveling of everything I had once believed to be true. I waited, watching her. She was calculating her next move. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched and how she avoided locking eyes with me. The Odessa I had married had always been a master at escaping difficult conversations, at turning the truth into something malleable. She had the skill to turn certainty into confusion. But this wasn't one of those times. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, and this time she had no exit. Eventually, she exhaled with deliberate slowness. Her posture straightened. For a brief moment, I saw the version of her that I had once trusted, the woman who could spin a story so well that even I believed in it. "I'm not sure what you think you saw," she said softly, her voice wrapped in false concern. "But this isn't how to handle things, Harlan." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "And how exactly should I handle it? Should I pretend it didn't matter when my own wife slipped out of the room the second she knew I was paying attention? Or should I ignore the fact that, for the first time, I truly see you for who you are?" Her lips pressed together into a tight line, but she clung to her performance. "You're acting like I've done something terrible." I tilted my head. "Haven't you?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she let out a softer breath. Her gaze finally lifted to meet mine, and in that instant, something in her eyes changed. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't sorrow. It was surrender. "Harlan," she said, her voice stripped of its usual edge. This time she didn't sound dismissive or defensive. She just sounded tired. I had been prepared for a lie. I expected her to double down, spin some carefully crafted tale to make me doubt what I knew. But instead, she did something completely unexpected. She sat down. It wasn't deliberate or composed. She simply collapsed onto the small leather chair beside the bookshelf, her elbows landing heavily on her knees. Her fingers combed through her hair, unraveling the perfectly placed curls she'd styled earlier. That was the moment it hit me. She was done pretending. I should have felt victorious, like I had finally cornered her. I should have felt something other than the numb, spreading chill in my chest. But all I could do was stand there and stare, bracing for whatever came next. She glanced up at me, and for the first time that evening there was no mask. No act. I was going to tell you, she murmured, barely louder than a whisper. My stomach twisted into knots. Tell me what? She gave a faint, weary smile. Do I really have to say it out loud? Yes, I needed her to say it. I needed to hear it, even if it broke me completely. Say it, Odessa. A pause followed. It lasted just long enough to stretch into something unbearable. Then finally, in a voice so soft it trembled, she said, I didn't mean for it to happen. There it was. Not quite a confession, but a step in that direction. The kind of reluctant truth that emerges only when someone's tired of the lie but too afraid to tell the whole story. I looked at her, and the wave of emotions that surged through me was overwhelming: anger, sorrow, a hollow grief that rooted itself deep inside. I had spent the entire night watching her, waiting for the slightest misstep. Now that I had it, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about a single evening, it was about all the signs I'd ignored. The long nights. The unexplained distance. The slow transformation of the woman I once knew into someone unfamiliar. I moved a step closer, each word she had spoken weighing me down. You didn't mean for what to happen? She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the sides of the chair. But before she could answer, the study door creaked open. And there he was, Isaac. He stood in the doorway, as stunned as I felt. His hands still clung to the doorknob, and his expression was a blend of shock and unmistakable guilt. Not the innocent kind that arises from a misunderstanding, but the deep, heavy kind that only comes from being exposed. Odessa turned to face him, her breath catching midair. She hadn't expected him to be there. That single look told me everything. I had been waiting all night for a sign, for a clue that would tie everything together. But this, his sudden appearance, was the final piece. It confirmed everything I had feared. I took another step, my heart thudding in my ears. Well, I said, my voice disturbingly calm, this is unexpected. Isaac shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening like he was scrambling for words. Harlan, man, I raised a hand to silence him. I didn't need another excuse. My attention shifted back to Odessa, whose face had gone pale. Her knuckles turned white from how tightly she gripped the chair. You were going to tell me, right? I asked, my gaze locked on hers. Or were you just planning to make it through tonight, hoping I'd stay clueless? She drew in a sharp breath. Harlan, please. Not here. A bitter laugh escaped me. Not here? Not in our home, surrounded by everyone we know? Of course not. That's not how you handle things, is it? You'd rather sweep it under the rug. Pretend nothing's wrong until you can control the version of the story that gets told. She flinched. It was subtle, but I caught it. Isaac stepped forward, clearing his throat as though he was about to explain. Look, this isn't what you think. I turned to him, my expression unreadable. Oh? Then why don't you go ahead and tell me what it really is? He hesitated. Just for a second. But that moment was enough. His face gave everything away. He had no defense. No clever spin. He knew it. And so did I. The silence returned, thick and unbearable. Then Odessa exhaled. Something shifted in her. The fear, the hesitation, it vanished. In its place was something colder, sharper. She leaned back, her body relaxed, her gaze no longer pleading but resolute. The second she opened her mouth, I already knew what was coming. She wasn't going to say sorry. She wasn't going to ask for forgiveness. She was going to take control of the story. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said again, but this time there was steel in her voice. But maybe it was inevitable. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Inevitable? I echoed. She shrugged lightly, as if we were discussing something trivial. You and I both know things haven't been right between us for a while. There it was, the justification. The quiet twist of the blade. I exhaled, dragging a hand through my hair. So now this is somehow my fault? She shook her head slowly, though it was clear there was no real conviction behind the gesture. That's not what I'm saying, she murmured. But it was, and we both knew it. I let the silence stretch between us, allowing my words to hang in the air before turning my gaze to Isaac, who still hovered near the door, visibly uneasy. And him? What's his justification? I asked. Isaac shifted awkwardly again, cleared his throat, and glanced toward the floor like he wished he could disappear. I didn't want to hurt you, Harlan, he said, voice low. A bitter laugh escaped me, empty and sharp. Oh, you didn't want to? Well, that changes everything. Odessa let out a sigh and rubbed her temples as if I were the one exhausting her patience. Harlan, please don't cause a scene, she said, her tone edging on exasperation. I stared at her, struggling to comprehend the sheer nerve behind her words. A scene. I echoed, disbelief thick in my voice. Is that what you're worried about? How this looks to other people? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The embarrassment on her face was obvious. She wasn't ashamed of her actions, only that they had been exposed. That was all the confirmation I needed. Turning toward the door, I felt the thud of my heartbeat echo through my chest. I had spent the entire night chasing the truth, and now that it was laid bare, I came to a sobering realization: there was nothing more to say. She had made her decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. I stood still for a few moments, letting the truth settle in fully. The weight of it pressed down on me, not in anger, not in sorrow, but in an undeniable sense of finality. Odessa had chosen her path. Isaac had followed. And me? I was finished. For the first time in what felt like forever, I experienced clarity, not driven by fury or heartbreak, but by a calm and resolute understanding. It was enough. I turned toward the door once more. Odessa shifted in her chair, her voice softer now, uncertain. Harlan. I paused but didn't turn to face her. There's no point, I said, my voice even. You've already made your decision. And now I've made mine. A heavy silence enveloped the room. I could feel her eyes on me, silently pleading, maybe hoping I'd offer her a final chance, a way to fix what had broken. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Isaac shifted again behind me, clearly uncomfortable. Look, man, I know this is a... I didn't let him finish. I cut in without turning. You don't get to say anything. He shut his mouth. I stepped forward, hand closing around the doorknob. And before leaving, I said the last words I had for either of them. You two deserve each other. Then I walked out, not glancing back. I didn't wait to see their reactions. I didn't pause for anything. I made my way through the party, slipping past the cheerful guests, the music, the laughter, and the cozy buzz of a room full of people who had no clue that just beyond a single door, an entire marriage had unraveled. By the time I reached the front entrance and stepped outside, the cool night air hit me sharply. But instead of feeling broken, I felt something different: relief. It was done. The house, the celebration, the deception, I left them all behind. I climbed into my car, turned the key in the ignition, and began to drive. I wasn't fleeing from the past, I was moving toward whatever the future had to offer. Odessa believed she'd walk away first, that she had the upper hand. But in the end, I was the one who truly walked away. And I never once looked back.